And I've been doing some study in the book of Revelation and Daniel, and I wanted to share some of the things I've been learning because I've been reading how the prophecies are to be repeated at the end. And so I'd like to share some of this with you, and you can see what you think. You don't have to agree, but it might be really valuable for the times we're living in. I'm going to share some Spirit of Prophecy quotes that I feel are really valuable. This is the first one. The book that was sealed was not the book of Revelation, but the portion of the prophecy of Daniel which related to the last days. The scripture says, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." Daniel 12:4. When the book was opened, the proclamation was made, "Time shall be no longer." Revelation 10:6. The book of Daniel is now unsealed, and the revelation made by Christ to John is to come to all the inhabitants of the earth. By the increase in knowledge, a people is to be prepared to stand in the latter day. Now, if you look at this, it says that the time shall be no longer because the book of Daniel is now unsealed. So the time that it's referring to there is that the time when the book was sealed, and no longer will it be sealed. It's also talking up here about the time of the end. And so we'll read some more about that. The message of Revelation 14 proclaimed that the hour of God's judgment is come, is given in the time of the end. There we have it again. The angel of Revelation 10 is represented as having 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the land. Now, this is what this shows. She's going to tell us, showing that the message will be carried to distant lands. The ocean will be crossed, and the islands of the sea will hear the proclamation of the last message of warning to our world. The light that Daniel received direct from God was given especially for these last days. The vision he saw on the banks of Ulai and Hiddekel, the great rivers of Shinar, are now in process of fulfillment, and all the events foretold will soon have come to pass. So she's putting that in the future, and she's talking about those prophecies in Daniel, that they are for the latter days, these last days. When the angel was about to unfold to Daniel the intensely interesting prophecies to be recorded for us who were to witness their fulfillment. That's a key there. Us who are to witness their fulfillment. The angel said, "Be strong, yea, be strong." Daniel 10:19. We are to receive the very same glory that was revealed to Daniel, because it is for God's people in these last days that they may give the trumpet a certain sound. So that's why I'm sharing these things, because I think it's important to give the trumpet a certain sound. So we're going to start in Daniel 2, and I'm going to go over the prophecies in ancient history and show how they're a typology of modern day. I'm going to start with the head of gold. And this was Nebuchadnezzar and his dream that he had, and Daniel was interpreting it. So we're going to read from Daniel 2:31 through 35. Thou, king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breasts and arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass. This image's head, the legs were of iron, his feet were of iron and clay. Thou sawest till a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then was the iron and the clay and the brass and the silver and the gold broken in pieces together, and became like chaff in the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried it away, and there was no place found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So that was the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Now we're going to go into it a little bit and talk about each of these kingdoms. This is the head of gold, represented Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel said, "Thou art the head of gold." So it was Nebuchadnezzar's image himself that he was seeing in the head. And then it was all of gold because it was a very wealthy, very, very wealthy empire. And Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that the other ones would be inferior to his. Next, we have the Medo-Persian Empire, and that one was from 539 to 331 BC. And there were two arms to it because it was the Medes and the Persians, and they were joined together in their kingdom, and it was quite a large kingdom. It spread all the way over towards India. And then we have the thighs of brass, and that represents Greece in 331 to 168 BC. And that was brass was what they used in their instruments of war, and they had that as part of their symbol. Then we have the legs of iron. That was Rome in 168 BC to 476 AD. And there were two legs, and that represented they also had a republican government like the United States does, but they also had their religion as a part of their government. And they were of iron because they were very strong and were very powerful. And iron was what they used for all of their implements of war. And then we have the feet of iron and clay. And that was the papal Rome and the nations of Europe time. And the nations of Europe were basically, the Roman Empire was split into about 10 kingdoms or nations. And we still have most of those today. And then we have the stone that was cut out without hands. That represents a heavenly stone. And it hits the image, knocks it over, and pulverizes it. And that represents God's kingdom being set up, which I want to share with you the possibility that this kingdom has to do with his kingdom of grace, because that was set up during the Roman Empire, and it was during that time that the gospel went to all of the world. So I just want to share that as a possibility of the meaning. Otherwise, you have a lot of time between the first setting up of all of those kingdoms of Europe to the time where Christ's second coming is. But that's part of what bothered me. I thought, well, there must be a repeat. Now we're going to go into Daniel 7, and I'm going to read about that. Daniel 7, 4 through 8. And the first beast was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted from off the earth, and made to stand on the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given unto it. Now this represents Babylon, just like the head of gold did. And the wings show how he conquered swiftly, and the powerful lion shows how he had power over all the other nations, because it's the king of the beasts. And he was king of kings on this earth. He was above all the other kings and took control, Nebuchadnezzar did. And so this represents the Babylonian Empire. And I beheld another beast, a second like a bear, and it raised itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, of it between the teeth of it. And they said unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. Now, this was the Medo Persian Empire, and it was similar to the arms of silver that were on the statue, and it was from 539 to 331. And the bones in its mouth represent some of the nations that it grabbed up. And the Medo Persian Empire, it had one shoulder above the other because the Medes were not as powerful as the Persians. The Persians were more powerful. And I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which was upon the back of the four wings of like a fowl. And the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, this represents the Grecian Empire, which was 331 to 168. And the 4 wings represent how swiftly it conquered the then known world. And it was very extensive. And Alexander the Great was the leader of it. And he conquered nations at such a swift pace. And that's why the leopard, which is known for its swiftness, and the 4 wings. But he died at his own hand in a drunken stupor. And the 4 heads were the 4 generals that took over after he was gone. And 2 of them were really powerful. The Ptolemies and the Seleucids, they kind of pulled out on top. The other 2 sort of disappeared from history. So that was also representing the Grecian Empire. And I saw in the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, terrible and dreadful, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with its feet. And it was diverse from all beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, this beast would represent Rome. And Rome was known for its powerful, violent thrusts against other peoples. So it was a terrible beast. It had 10 horns because eventually it was split up into the 10 most prominent nations of Europe. And then we have a little horn. And as I considered the horns, behold, there came up another of them among the little. It was a little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And it goes on and it talks about how that little horn power rose up and magnified itself against God. And those 3 that were taken out were ones that it just kind of absorbed, and they were disappeared at that time. And the little horn itself was Papal Rome, and it ruled all the nations of Europe for a while. Hey, this is the historical interpretation of all these things. But now we have to look and think about how can that apply to our time. And so I want to go into some of that with you and see what might fit with this that we maybe have never even considered. I'm taking most of this from the History of the World from a Becca book series. It was for high school, we used it for our kids. Now, this is Queen Victoria, and she was the head of the British Empire and made it very, very prosperous. Now, in 1798, the Little Horn power was taken down when Napoleon took the Pope captive and put him in prison. And after that time, they lost their power. And what was coming up at that time in the 1800s was the British Empire. And I'm going to read to you a few things out of here that really seem to fit with it being a possible repeat of history, and this being in place of Babylon, or the richest nation that ever lived or occurred. It says here that the British Empire was known for the reign of Queen Victoria, the longest reigning monarch in English history. Great Britain had reached the height of its glory between 1837 and 1901 and became the leading country of the world. The British Empire covered a quarter of the globe and included about a quarter of the world's people, so that it could be said that the sun never sets on the British Empire. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, South Africa, and many other parts of Africa and Asia belong to the British Empire. The policies of free trade and worldwide reputation for honesty made England the world's leading manufacturing country, the wealthiest nation in the world, and the world's banker. So they were known for being extremely wealthy. In Wikipedia, it says that the British Empire held sway over 412 million people, about 2/3 of the world's population, which is more than ever existed before. And it covered about 35,500,000 kilometers squared. And it was about 24% of the Earth's total land area. So it was a very, very extensive kingdom. And just like you had the head of gold, they were extremely rich, just like Babylon was. They were the wealthiest nation or empire at that time, as it said. And also, guess what its symbol was? A lion. They had it on many of their things, and it was a part of their coat of arms and different things. So lions were a symbol for that country, which was what was the symbol for Babylon. Remember that lion? And here's the head of gold. And so England would fit very closely to what the Babylonian Empire was. And in 1798, it was the end of time. And so the reason that these can repeat is because the time of the end started. Now, that was 228 years ago, but it started the prophecies over again at that time because the time of the end occurred. Now, the next nation that came into power was the Russian Empire. And in 1919, Lenin organized the Third International, a terrorist organization dedicated to spreading communist revolution throughout the world and establishing a worldwide communist state. Soon, the deceit and violence of atheistic communism began to spread throughout the whole world. It says, at the height of its power, the Soviet Union included 15 republics covering 1/7 of the Earth's population of nearly 300 million people. So it was 412 million that the British Empire was over, and this is 300 million. So it was inferior to the head of gold. It was the silver arms. Now, Lenin came into power, and he set up a totalitarian state, which means that the government controlled every area of the citizens' lives. He was known as the Red Terror, and more than 50,000 Russians were executed under his reign. And he brutally crushed every freedom that they had. And after him, we have Stalin. And this is what the book says: Stalin was one of the most brutal rulers of all times. He was personally responsible for the deaths of millions of Russians. At least 10 million people died, and under Lenin, 7 million. So you've got about 17 million people in Russia that died under the rule of these two communist leaders. And interestingly enough, even when I was growing up, we called it the Big Red Bear. And that's what called the Russian bear. It was known for its symbol of the bear. And that is what was the symbol for the Medo-Persian Empire, which this one is a type of the Medo-Persian Empire. And also the arms. And it had two parts to it. And that was communism and atheism that made up the very base of their empire. Now, what would come next? What would be the third empire that could fit in place of Greece? And what happened in this world at that time? Hitler came to power. Hitler had already come to power as Chancellor of Germany in 1933, and he set up the Third Reich, or the Third Empire. And during his war that he perpetuated, he was known as setting up the Blitzkrieg, which was a German word for lightning war. And like a flash of lightning, Nazi forces smashed all of Poland's resistance before it had a chance to even organize. And then it invaded Denmark and Norway. And Denmark fell within hours, but Norway held out until May. Holland fell in 5 days and Belgium in 18. Even before resistance had been crushed in Holland and Belgium, Germany troops began their assault on the northern France. The German Blitzkrieg was very swift and overwhelming, and the British and French troops who had assembled in northern France to block the Nazi advancement were soon pushed to the little port of Dunkirk on the English Channel. Once Dunkirk fell, the surrender of France was only a matter of time. The city of Paris fell on June 14, 1940. So you can see how swiftly his army was pushing across Europe and taking over Europe and setting up the Empire of Germany. During the height of their, or right before they were taken over in July of 1944, they were administrating all of this area in Germany. Huge, huge area. And they had power over all those countries. And during the war, I heard one time that there was leopards on some of his early tanks. Now, I couldn't exactly find that and see it, but so I can't verify that, but it's a possibility. And that was what was the symbol. 60 million people had died in World War II because of Germany Empire. And okay, the leopard was the symbol of Greece. And why was it a symbol? Because it was so swift. Alexander the Great went through all big area, the Middle East, Persia area, and went over into Asian area and up into Europe very swiftly, very quickly. And there were 4 heads on that beast, And Hitler moved quickly like that. And after he fell, there were four countries that kind of split up his empire: the United States, Russia, and France and Britain. Now, Russia and the United States were the ones that came out on top, just like the Seleucids and the Ptolemies did. And so we have the fall of the Grecian Empire that was in type. It was the German Empire. So what happened at the end of that time? Who took over next? It was the United States. It started in the late 1700s, early 1800s. It was getting started more strongly. It's gained its independence, and during that time, it was set up as a republic and a Protestant nation. A republic means ruled by law. And we know that it became a large area. And after World War II, there was a setting up of America as a superpower. And now a superpower is a state with a dominant position characterized by its extensive ability to exert an influence or project power onto a global scale. And the term was first applied post World War II to the United States, and that comes from Wikipedia. So they became a superpower or a world power, and they are the ones who are like Rome. Now, Rome was known as a republic, and the United States was a republic. There's a book written by a man named Alonzo Jones, and it says it's called The Two Republics. And so there was comparisons that could be made between those two, between the United States and Rome. And during World War II and right after, there was one of the Japanese generals that said, "I fear we have just awakened a sleeping giant." And so the United States has been ruling in a sense over the world as a superpower, influencing the world on a global scale. And then after that comes the powers, the little horn power, and it is brought into power by the United States. Now we're getting into what comes yet. That beast had 10 horns, and as we know that it was very powerful, it also had legs of iron, which meant it was very powerful, and its toes were split into 10 parts, or there were 10 horns on the beast, and they are saying that there are 10 kingdoms to be proposed for the New World Order. Now, this is yet to be seen. I don't know if it'll actually happen that way, but it's a possibility that under the New World Order, it'll be split up that way. And the little horn power that'll rule in the New World Order is the same as the one that ruled back then, Papal Rome. And the feet are the splitting up of the different nations, and the New World Order will rule over them all. And after that, we have the rock that is cut out without hands, and we have it hitting the statue that came into existence after 1798, when we were in the time of the end, and the prophecies were to repeat. We've got the head of gold, England, and we have the arms of silver, which represented Russia. We have the brass belly and thighs, which represented Hitler. We have the legs of iron, or the Republic, which was the US. And we've got the feet of iron and clay, which represents the splitting up of the nations into 10 parts in the world under the New World Order. And then the rock comes and hits it, represents the shattering of the nations of the world and Christ's second coming, the kingdom of glory. The first coming at the time after the historical fulfillment was the kingdom of grace being set up. This is the kingdom of glory being set up. I hope this has helped you and been something that you can understand and that it makes some sense to you. And I do believe that it really does fit our time. And here is a quote again: the study of Revelation in connection with Daniel is to be studied, for history will be repeated. So I hope and pray we're ready for that time, because we're getting down to those feet. They're trying to set up the New World Order right now, and it's not going to last long. So be ready. Be ready for Jesus' second coming at all times. Let your heart be renewed every day and be made pure and holy through the power of Jesus Christ. He has power to do it. Turn it over to Him every day. Every time you see a temptation come before you, turn your heart to Jesus, and He will give you that power. So I hope this has helped you, and I hope you can be blessed by it.